Greetings, loved ones. Today we're going to talk about trauma, the types, symptoms, treatments. Help us get these messages out. Subscribe to our channel. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and share these messages with others. You could save a life. In general, trauma can be defined as a psychological, emotional response to an event or an experience that is deeply distressing or disturbing. When loosely applied, this trauma definition can refer to something upsetting such as being involved in an accident, having an illness or injury, losing a loved one, or going through a divorce. However, it can also encompass the far extreme and include experiences that are severely damaging, such as rape or torture. Because events are viewed subjectively, this broad trauma definition is more of a guideline. Everyone processes a traumatic event differently because we all face them through the lens of prior experiences in our lives. For example, one person might be upset and fearful after going through a hurricane, but someone else might have lost family and barely escaped from a flooded home during a hurricane. In this case, a minor Category 1 hurricane may bring up traumatic flashbacks of their terrifying experience. Because trauma reactions fall across a wide spectrum, psychologists have developed categories as a way to differentiate between types of trauma. Among them are complex trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, and developmental trauma disorder. So complex trauma, let's talk about that. Complex trauma is trauma that happens repetitively. It often results in direct harm to the individual, and the effects of complex trauma are cumulative. The traumatic experience frequently transpires within a particular time frame or within a specific relationship, and often in a specific setting. In post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD can develop after a person has been exposed to a terrifying event or has been through an ordeal in which intense physical harm occurred or was threatened. Sufferers of PTSD have persistent and frightening thoughts and memories of their ordeal. And then there's developmental trauma disorder. Developmental trauma disorder is a recent term in the study of psychology. This disorder forms during a child's first 3 years of life. The result of abuse, neglect, and/or abandonment. Developmental trauma interferes with the infant or child's neurological, cognitive, and psychological development. It disrupts the victim's ability to attach to an adult caregiver. An adult who inflicts developmental trauma usually doesn't do it intentionally. Rather, it happens because they're not aware of the social and emotional needs of their children. So let's talk about trauma symptoms. Often shock and denial are typical reactions to a traumatic event. And over time, these emotional responses, they'll fade. But a survivor may also experience reactions long term. And these long-term reactions to a traumatic event can include anger, persistent feelings of sadness and despair, flashbacks, unpredictable emotions, physical symptoms such as nausea and headaches, intense feelings of guilt as if they are somehow responsible for the event, an altered sense of shame, feelings of isolation, and hopelessness. So let's talk about trauma therapy. Trauma therapy is not a one-size-fits-all. It must be adapted to address different symptoms in different people. Mental health professionals who are specially trained in treating trauma can assess the survivor's unique needs and plan treatment specifically for them. Currently, there are several trauma therapy modalities in place, and we're going to briefly discuss each of them. There is the cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. This teaches the person to become more aware of their thoughts and beliefs about their trauma and gives them skills to help them react to emotional triggers in a healthy way. Then there's exposure therapy. This is also called in vivo exposure therapy. is a form of cognitive behavior therapy that is used to reduce a fear associated with the emotional triggers that cause the trauma. And then there's talk therapy. This is psychodynamic psychotherapy. This is a method of verbal communication that is used to help a person find relief from emotional pain and strengthen the adaptive ways of problem management that the individual already possesses. These modalities treat the memory portion, the unconsciousness of the trauma. However, we do now know that a survivor's conscious brain must be treated as well. And recent studies have found that body-oriented approaches such as mindfulness, yoga, and EMDR are powerful tools for helping the mind and body reconnect. Additionally, neurofeedback, a type of biofeedback that focuses on brain waves, shows promise in helping patients with trauma symptoms learn to change their brainwave activity to help them become calmer and better able to engage with others. So let's talk about healing from trauma. It is possible to heal from emotional and psychological trauma. We know that the brain changes in response to a traumatic experience. However, by working with a mental health professional who specializes in trauma, you can leave your trauma behind and you can learn to feel safe again. The question is not if you will encounter a victim of violence. The question before God is, what will you do when you do encounter them? You could be the person who saves a life. You are called. We are all called to be champions for justice. And those who suffer violence and trauma need to know that those who love them and those who don't even know them will step out and reach out to give them the help they need before it's too late. So, if you're a victim of violence, please listen to me. You are valued. You are loved. You are intelligent, and yes, you are worthy. God does not want you to suffer violence. He wants you to live free from violence and trauma, and He wants you to live in peace and tranquility. And I want you to know that there is a way out. There is healing. It's not your fault. Abuse is not love. And above all, I want you to know you are not alone. If you're a victim of violence, please reach out to somebody today. If you find yourself in a dangerous situation, call 911 for help. And if you know of anybody who's suffering violence or trauma, reach out to help them and tell the authorities. In our next episode, we're going to talk about the 7 hidden effects of trauma and complex trauma. Until then, God bless you.